Hi, second graders. Today we're going to be starting the book Enemy Pie by Derek Munson, illustrated by Tara Callahan King. So that means that Derek Munson wrote the words and Tara Callahan King illustrated or drew the pictures. So look at this. It says, I see this little boy, and look, it's a pie, and it says, for my best enemy. But, which sounds really nice, doesn't it? But look, what is the pie? It's like worms. So maybe it's not so nice. Enemy pie. So I'm thinking maybe it's about a pie that if you're going to give it to your enemy, maybe it's not the best pie, right? All right, let's get started with this book. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad had helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood, right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in the baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline and I wasn't even invited. But my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. See his list. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too, but he knew a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. Enemy pie, he said, satisfied. You may be wondering what exactly is in enemy pie. I was wondering too, but Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kinds of things, disgusting things, would I put it into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden. He just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he needed those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing all morning. He gave it right back to me. Oh, look at that. So Dad seems to be cooking over here, right? And he's bringing all sorts of yucky things to Dad. I went to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang. Ooh. Guys, that's a tough word sometimes and not a word that we read a lot of times, right? Boomerang. Let's look at that word and let's see if we can use that strategy that we've talked about to find little words inside of big words. Do you see some smaller words inside the word boomerang? Well, I see the word boom. Do you see that? Boom, right? And I also see the word rang. So if I knew the words boom and rang, boom, ang, boomerang. Do you see how we did that? Finding those smaller words inside of the bigger words. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me. And all the while I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how terrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. As far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a bit confused. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell he had made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out or their breath stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. He talked quietly. There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through all this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. Okay, so as you're reading today, please practice finding those little words inside the big word on those tricky words that you come across.